ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Nathan Burnett, episode 68. I'm going to keep it a buck with y'all. We have not recorded in a very long time, as I'm sure you guys have been able to tell. Big reason for that, if I'm being completely honest, is I had to get a new mic arm. So I spent a long time on this setup, as I said last time, and the mic arm that I previously had was pretty much broken, could not use it at all. Could not get the mic to where I wanted. And so if I was going to record a podcast episode, I was going to have to do it in another location. And I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to keep this sort of setup. And so it took me a while, got a new mic arm, got it set up, all that good stuff. And life's also just been kind of busy and all that. But I really wanted to record an episode right before the season started. So that's what we're going to do today. Hopefully this episode, once I get it edited, all that good stuff, will drop on the same day as the season, about an hour or two before tip-off, so you guys can get all my season predictions, season preview, all that good stuff out of the way before the season starts. But I know it's been a minute, guys, but I'm excited. So I'm wearing Clan the Spurs fans merch. Shout out to Clan. Just random, thought I'd throw that in there. But as always, I also made a community post saying that I'm starting to post more on Instagram as well. So go follow the Instagram, all those links in the description. But I also have a big other announcement to make for you guys, which actually isn't really related to basketball, but another reason I've been really busy. I'm actually working on an indie game, you guys. So I'll go ahead and put some artwork up on the screen in the full video. Obviously, while I'm streaming, I can't put it up. But in the actual YouTube video, I'll put it up somewhere right here. In future podcast episodes, when I have a trailer, things like that, I'll also play clips of that, clips of gameplay, all that good stuff. And more details of the game will be released somewhere else. I don't really want to dive into it since y'all are here for basketball. But again, if you guys want to support me in other projects, I do have that going on. There's a Patreon in the description, all that good stuff. So, but let's go ahead and get into the basketball stuff. A lot of preseason stuff has been happening. A lot of trades, a lot of chaos, everything like that. So let's pick a point to start, and I think that would be the trades. So I watched the games that I could. Again, a lot has been going on in my life, so tried to watch the games that I could. The games that I couldn't watch, I watched the highlights, all that good stuff. And to be completely honest, I think that the Timberwolves really won the Karl Anthony Towns trade. I know a lot of people were disappointed to see Karl Anthony Towns leave because he was really loyal to the Timberwolves. There was even a TikTok reel, Instagram reel, whatever you want to call it, that came out where right after he was traded, he was still watching preseason games of his team on his phone when he was at a concert. I forget which concert it was. But rather than watching the concert, he wanted to watch his, quote-unquote, his team continue to play, the team that he was no longer on. So it shows you that he really cared about the Timberwolves, and obviously him and Anthony Edwards got along pretty well. But in all honesty, the Timberwolves really won that trade just from what I've seen. Now, I'm going to preface everything I say with just saying, like, yes, it's preseason. So I say that every year, but, you know, this is, like, my second job. So I have to have something to make content about. Right now, what we have to base judgment on is preseason, but I always preface that every year with it's preseason. We see people that score 3 points per game in preseason, and then during the season they go off and have 18 plus points per game, and we see the opposite as well, where somebody could have 20 plus points per game in preseason, then they get to the real NBA. And regular season, they're dropping like 5 points per game. So take everything preseason grain of salt. That's always my advice. That being said, though, I watched Karl Anthony Towns, and Karl Anthony Towns with the Knicks was just really, really slow and lazy, in my opinion. And it's not necessarily Karl Anthony Towns specifically either, but that whole Knicks team I saw really had a problem transitioning. And if I'm able to, if I'm allowed to, if YouTube doesn't copyright it, I'll put some clips next to me of sort of what I'm talking about. But the Knicks really struggled on transition. There were multiple moments where there were mismatches because Karl Anthony Towns was guarding a guard while the guards were on the guarding the forwards and the bigs. A lot of mismatches there, leaving people way too wide open, which led to Dante DiVincenzo having really good night, which I'm going to get into as well. But the whole Knicks team, again, was just really bad getting from offense to defense, which gave a lot of points up to the Timberwolves. And this wasn't just for the Timberwolves either, which is why I'm bringing it up. I watched the Knicks-Wizards game. I watched other Knicks preseason games to, again, kind of get a feel for Karl Anthony Towns. And you saw that in every preseason game with the Knicks, where they were really slow getting to defense, getting to their positions, and other teams took advantage of that. Again, like they played the Wizards, which last season were incredibly bad. Like they were almost as bad as the Pistons, but the Knicks were losing in preseason to the Wizards. So that tells you how rough they were having of a preseason, where if you're losing to the Wizards, something's going on there. And again, with Karl Anthony Towns more specifically, to get more into the trade and everything, he really wasn't trying too hard to rebound. Again, even though the Knicks team as a whole was transitioning bad, Karl Anthony Towns was also really bad, specifically on transition. Just a lot of light jogs, very slow, again, very lazy. Didn't really get up for rebounds, didn't really try too hard. And again, you can credit that partly to preseason. He may be taking it easy to try and conserve energy, prevent injury for regular season. But I think a large part of that is also getting adjusted to the Knicks. Again, he really cared for the Timberwolves team, and he's really getting adjusted. But the Timberwolves seemed like they were much more fast-paced. They were really firing on more cylinders than that Knicks team, which is why, to me, just so far in preseason, it seems the Timberwolves really won that trade, because they are doing more with that trade than the Knicks are with Cat right now, which goes into Dante DiVincenzo's shooting, which, again, if you go and you watch the highlights, you'll see it very clearly, where Dante DiVincenzo was just left open multiple times, and even when he wasn't left open, he just had a catch and shoot, and it really played into how the Timberwolves are playing, because the Timberwolves were really pushing the pace that game against the Knicks, and pushing the pace against the other teams as well, which really works well for the Timberwolves. We even saw that in the playoffs against the Nuggets, where the Nuggets were getting tired and they just could not keep up. And so the Timberwolves are starting to push the pace a little bit more. But without Anthony Edwards, they needed one more shooter, because the only other shooter they really had was Mike Conley. And Mike Conley is 37 years old. So while the stats line up with Mike Conley being a really good player, having really good shooting percentage, having really good points per game, he's still 37 years old, right? So whenever you push the pace like that, not only are you going to tire out the other team, you're also going to tire out your older players and your older veterans like Mike Conley. And so they really needed to add another guard to kind of keep up with that pace. And Dante DiVincenzo is doing that very, very well. They're, again, with that pushing the pace, the Timberwolves took advantage of the Knicks being unable to transition well, and had a lot of fast break points, both from Anthony Edwards shooting, driving through the paint, Dante DiVincenzo, pull up jumper, things like that. And so DiVincenzo has really inserted himself into this team. He's gotten adjusted very well, can play into the Knicks, or not the Knicks, the Timberwolves system very well. And again, it's just his shooting. I really liked for the Timberwolves. OG Anunoby. I always have trouble pronouncing his name, so I apologize, guys. Everybody always gets on to me about pronunciations, but sometimes it's difficult. OG Anunoby, he also did very well for the Knicks, I will admit. Him and Brunson seem to match up really well. I did think that Brunson was sort of doing the bulk of the work, which has been the trend for the Knicks for a while, which is why the Knicks have been trying to get more players. But even then, it seemed like Brunson was really doing pretty much all of it for the Knicks. He was driving through the paint, shooting from beyond the arc, and OG Anunoby was doing really good in the paint as well. Again, like he seemed like he was working harder for rebounds than Cat was, even though Cat is the taller person on the team. That's what his responsibilities are at that position. But I did watch Cameron Payne a little bit. This is somebody that got traded to the Knicks that kind of has gone under the radar now that the Karl-Anthony Towns trade has happened. But Cameron Payne also joined the Knicks. And if I can go to his stats here, I wrote down his Cameron Payne stats lately. And I wrote down that he's very hit or miss. Because on October 18th, he went 1 for 6 from 3. On October 15th, he was 3 for 9. October 13th, he was 1 for 3. October 9th, he was 4 of 6. And October 6th, he was 1 for 7. And those are all his 3-point percentage. From field goal, he stays within the 35 to 45 range pretty well. But from 3-point percentage, he can have really good nights and he can have really bad nights. But if Cameron Payne continues to have good nights, hopefully, that can work really well for the Knicks. Because, again, I was seeing that where Cameron Payne is hitting these incredible threes from way far out. And, again, that takes a lot of load off of Brunson, where Brunson has been doing a lot for the Knicks. And I think that Cameron Payne during this trade has kind of been underrated, where, again, not a lot of people are talking about Cameron Payne going to the Knicks. But that's an important piece as well that could play into things. Because, I mean, he only averages 7 points per game. So, again, it's like not many people are going to make note of it. But it's good to pay attention to that and talk about it. I did also talk about Anthony Edwards' turnovers. Anthony Edwards did have a couple silly turnovers that I saw against the Knicks and in some other games. So hopefully he works those out by regular season, because if those happen in regular season, and especially the playoffs, that could be really bad. Because we can see how easily like 1 or 2 turnovers can really make a game in the playoffs. But being as somebody that rooted for the Timberwolves last year because of my predictions and seeing what they did against the Nuggets, I really like how this Timberwolves team is looking so far, because, again, they seem like they're really pushing the pace, and that is going to tire out a lot of teams, especially teams, again, like the Nuggets. And the only thing they'll really have to get adjusted to for teams like the Nuggets is not to overdo pushing the pace, because that's something I was really worried about in the playoffs, is they were going to push the pace too much, and the Nuggets were going to have the home court advantage because of the altitude of Denver, and by trying to tire out the Nuggets, they were going to tire out themselves with the altitude, but luckily that didn't end up happening. But it's still something to be weary of or be aware of. DeMar DeRozan to the DeMar DeRozan to the Kings, sorry, I put that the Kings as a whole feel very disorganized. It seemed like they were just kind of all over the place, and that is really hurting their performance and just their capabilities. Like it being unorganized, they're not performing to the best that they can. I did put that the opposite of what I expected to happen was going on, just from what I saw that me and a lot of people were worried that DeMar DeRozan does tend to ask for the ball a lot more. That's something that was an issue with the Spurs. Is the Spurs the Spurs are a team that works best in a system where everybody is touching the ball, everybody's sharing the ball, and when we had DeMar DeRozan, that kind of disrupted that system. DeMar DeRozan, excellent player, and he was, one of the more decent players we had for the Spurs during that time because, we lost Kawhi, and then that started sort of the rebuild and everything. But still, it was disruptive because DeMar DeRozan needed his hands on the ball. And with him and Sabonis, it was kind of a worry of, are people going to take touches away from each other? Is one person going to outperform the other and request the ball more? Is it going to disrupt the system just like it did with the Spurs? And while the Kings do seem disorganized, like I said, it doesn't seem like it's as a result of DeMar DeRozan having the ball, at least. And DeMar DeRozan, from what I saw, didn't really get that many possessions, as a matter of fact. So I feel like they're doing a good job of coaching that and keeping the ball evenly divided. Because I've talked before about how the Kings are kind of replicating that Spurs system basketball, and that's why they're winning so many games. And the Kings, in my opinion, are one of the last remaining teams that really plays position basketball, where everybody actually plays their position how they're supposed to and has a responsibility. DeMar DeRozan came in as a small forward and is playing a really good small forward. Sabonis is still at the power forward position and is playing really good power forward. And then you have people like Kevin Huerter, Malik Monk playing shooting guard really well. And then, of course, you have De'Aaron Fox playing point guard. So everybody's kind of filling their positions very, very well. And that's what needs to continue, is that people don't need to overextend and overreach in their responsibilities where, again, DeMar DeRozan tries to get the ball and tries to play point guard more than small forward. He needs to stick to that small forward position and do what he can do best. That being said, when DeMar DeRozan does get the ball, he's been really efficient at the mid-range shot, which, again, is what DeMar DeRozan is known for. They call him the mid-range magician and all that. So I think that's really going to help piece into that Kings system once they get all the disorganization figured out. Once they actually can put all the pieces together, and that'll take coaching, which Mike Brown is a really excellent coach, learned under Pop for that system basketball that we're talking about. Once they all sort of click, I think that will actually be really good for the Kings because each player has sort of their own skill set and, again, their own position that they can play into versus, these Lukas, these LeBrons, where they're playing literally like 4 positions of point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, like the entire spectrum. DeMar DeRozan can just stick to small forward, power forward, and Sabonis can just stick to power forward and so on. Let's see, what else we got here? I was hoping to see the Nuggets play Westbrook in the preseason so I could get an idea of him, but I didn't get to catch the Nuggets games in full, but I tried going and looking at the highlights, and I did not see him at all in the highlights, so I will have to check how many minutes he got in preseason because I don't know how many minutes he had in preseason, but I did not see him at all play for the Nuggets, which is really puzzling. And I was hoping to see him play and sort of comment on it, but I did not really get to see much of him. With the Warriors, Mavericks, Klay shooting is obviously the biggest story there. He shot 0 for 9 in one game. And I know the cliche answer is that it's just in his head, right? And the best way I can explain that, even though it's the cliche answer, is, this was a massive trade. Everybody was shocked by this, where, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are splitting up, the Splash Brothers, they're breaking up, all that, right? For all the people that don't watch basketball, I know my girlfriend's watching, this was, what's his name? This was Zayn leaving One Direction type news. This was massive, right? And all of us reacted to that as fans, right? We reacted to that from the outside. Now imagine what it's like to be on the inside of that story. Imagine what it's like to actually be Klay, to leave Steph Curry, to leave this team that you've been on for so many years, the team that you won. Imagine this team you won 4 rings on. Everybody makes the joke that Klay Thompson always holds up the number 4 by saying I won 4 rings. He won 4 rings with that team. He won 4 rings with, his best friend, Steph Curry. That was a duo. They called themselves the Splash Brothers. They were brothers. And he has to leave that team. And, it's affecting him. He has to get adjusted to being on a new team. And that's going to take time. The question is, how will this affect the Mavericks, right? Because the Mavericks got him, and everybody thought that this was going to be sort of like a big 3 situation where you have Luka, you have Kyrie, you have Klay Thompson. But now the question is, how many minutes do you give Klay Thompson? Do you allow him to get out of his head, or do you allow him to be on the bench more and not risk it? Because the more minutes you give Klay, the more possessions you give Klay to try and get adjusted to this team, the less possessions that gives Luka, the less possession that gives Kyrie, that have proven that those two can work together really well. And so while adding Klay is an excellent shooter, or at least in the past was an excellent shooter, depending on how you look at it. Again, everybody's going to have their own takes there. It's really a question of, is Klay going to come in and disrupt this team, or is Klay going to come in and help this team? And that's really hard to see at this point, because Klay's history speaks for itself, but his current stats also speak for themselves. So is he going to get out of his own head, or are we going to have a Ben Simmons type scenario where he continues to have a mental blockage that's affecting his game? And I guess we'll wait and see what happens when in that case. I did want to talk about sort of end of an era type stuff as well. I've talked about this for years. Well, not that many years, because it's really happened more recently, but I've at least talked about this many times. But this is truly the beginning of a new era, right? And that makes sense, since it's, it's midway through the decade. Usually every decade or so is considered its own era. The 80s is different from the 90s. 90s are different from the 2000s. The 2010s are different from the 2000s, so on. And now we're getting into the mid 2020s, and the 2020s are going to be different from the 2010s. And people need to really realize and come to the gravity of the situation that this is most likely LeBron's last year. And I know many people have said that multiple times, but now he's playing with Bronny, right? He said the last thing he wants to do before he retires is play with Bronny. Now he's accomplishing that. He could say that okay, I've played with Bronny. I've done what I want to do. This is my last year. If this is not his last year, I have a feeling that definitely next year will be. Uh, and LeBron's going to leave. And once LeBron leaves, that's going to cause a very, very large domino effect. I've made a video about this where when LeBron retires, LeBron will not be the only one to retire. When LeBron retires, Curry is 1 or 2 years behind. KD after that, Harden after that, Westbrook after that. It's just going to continue to domino where all of these players that came in early 2000s, they have, 3 or so years left in them, if that for some of them. And it's really going to cast a spotlight on these younger players even more. Luka's already in year 7 or something like that. Luka's already in year 7, so he's already a mid-age player for NBA wise. And so then we start looking at players like Anthony Edwards, players like Tyrese Halliburton. Of course, Wemby is going to be thrown in there because Wemby is the most hyped prospect since LeBron, and he's been getting the spotlight a lot. And that's really going to shine a spotlight on these younger players, and I'm actually really excited for that because I like a lot of these younger players. I really like Anthony Edwards. Of course, as a Spurs fan, I love Wemby. But I'm excited for this new era, but I want to get your guys' opinion. Obviously it's sort of a somber and melancholy feeling, but it can also give a feeling of excitement. Like we're sad to see this old era leave. The era of Steph Curry, the era of LeBron, the era of these players that we grew up watching. But at the same time, players like Shaq, players like Kobe, players like MJ had to retire at some point. Now these players are retiring and giving the spotlight to the new generation, just like MJ gave the spotlight to Kobe, Kobe gave the spotlight to LeBron, and so on. So we'll be able to give the spotlight to these other players that other people will grow up with. We could be saying 10 years from now, somebody could be like, oh, yeah, I grew up watching Wemby, just like somebody's saying now, I grew up watching LeBron, I grew up watching MJ. And, it just makes you think of that passage of time, especially now that, again, Bronny himself is playing in the league alongside LeBron. So, speaking of the Lakers, though, Dalton Knecht, which, by the way, excellent jersey number. If you haven't seen it, Dalton Knecht is wearing the number 4 last time I checked. And basically the joke there is his jersey says Knecht 4, which is hilarious in my opinion. But I saw some people saying that the Lakers basically drafted rookie Klay Thompson. With Klay Thompson shooting bad now, the Lakers have the new Klay Thompson because of how crazy he was shooting. I think he scored, something like 34, 35 points, something like that. And, it was nuts. So I'm really excited to see what he does. I'm not a Lakers fan by any means. As you guys may have been able to tell. But while I do a basketball show, despite being a Spurs fan, I love just good basketball in general, and Dalton Knecht is really bringing that. So I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see a lot of players this year. Bronny James, a lot of people have had controversy about, people saying he's a Nepo draft pick and all that. But then again, he was drafted at 55th pick. So, it's not like he was picked first overall, anything like that. So, but with that said, he didn't end up having 17 points against a majority of the Warriors roster. So, it just goes to show how much training and everything like that went in with, him being LeBron's son. And we'll see how he does in regular season, of course. We'll also see how many minutes he gets in regular season as well. But I don't really subscribe to the whole he's a bust narrative because, again, he was the 55th pick. He's doing semi-well against some pretty decent teams. So I think for 55th pick, he's doing about as well, if not better, than you would expect him to be. So I think that can go ahead and kill that narrative. And we'll just see what happens because, people made jokes about Thanasis and Giannis's brother, but I honestly think that Bronny is doing better than that. Even though I'm a huge Giannis fan, I love the whole Antetokounmpo family, especially after seeing their movies and documentaries and learning about his story. That's why Giannis is personally my favorite player, even though I am a Spurs fan. But, Thanasis' stats speak for themselves. So Vince Carter and Chauncey Billups both made the Hall of Fame. I don't have too much to say on that other than I've made a video on both of them and talked about all of their accolades. So I'm glad that they have both finally been accepted into the Hall of Fame with everything that they have contributed to the game. Couple more things I have on here. I was going to talk about WNBA stuff, but I will save that for next episode because the WNBA finals just concluded, and so I have to take a look at the stats, the highlights, all that. I didn't get to catch the games live, but I did see that a lot of people were criticizing the fouls and saying that the game was robbed, all that, so I will have to take a look into that. I know some people try to criticize when I talk about WNBA, but this is a basketball channel, and basketball means all basketball. I wear college basketball shirts on this podcast. I talk about March Madness. Every now and then I talk about G League. So we are going to talk about WNBA on this podcast, and I don't want to seem antagonistic towards any of my viewers, of course, but frankly, I have in the past talked about WNBA and people have left some very distasteful comments. And I will just say, if you have a problem with me talking about the WNBA, or the WNBA in general, my solution to that is simply to grow up. If you are a grown adult and you are cheering for the NBA, cheering for the NFL, whatever team you go for, and putting down women's sports, what are you doing? You're a grown adult. That's all I gotta say. But I will try and talk about WNBA stuff some more next episode. I do want to put some ranking predictions, talk about where I think teams will end up, sort of what award predictions will happen. The big one is MVP. So the NBA released who they think are the top 3 MVPs going into the season, and Jokic is not on that list. And I, for one, am very okay with that. I have said for years that Jokic is an amazing player. He's definitely MVP level for every year that he's won it. But voter fatigue definitely comes in. And voter fatigue has definitely hit me, hit some others, where I want to see somebody else except Jokic. And I'm going to make, I actually already did make an Instagram post referencing a tweet I made back in 2022. And I said in 2022, if Luka Doncic does not win MVP in the next 3 seasons, then the MVP is meaningless. And I did a poll on that, referencing that tweet, and I said, is this a hot take, or do you guys agree? And it's been very 50-50, but you guys can let me know down in the comments what you guys think. But I've been personally pushing Luka for MVP for a couple years, and Jokic has just been slightly above him every single year. But Luka really deserves the recognition for what he does for the Mavericks. That is definitely going to be shadowed a little bit and diminished due to the fact that they have Kyrie on the team now, because now Luka isn't going to have as many of those, 60, 20, 10 games because they have another guard on the team. But looking at what he's previously done with those 60, 20, 10 games, and now he can get even more assist numbers with Kyrie, he really deserves his recognition for what he is able to do. And the NBA released that their top 3 for MVP are Luka, SGA, and Anthony Edwards. And so that really made me happy because I really do think this is the year that Luka wins it. And if Luka doesn't win it, then SGA is definitely going to take it. I personally, even being somebody that cheers for the Timberwolves a bit more, I don't think Anthony Edwards is up there for MVP just yet. Yes, he is definitely top 3, just like the NBA said. But for actually winning the award, I don't think he's there yet. He did a lot in the playoffs, has done a lot for the team itself, but he can also get gassed very quickly. Again, we saw that in the playoffs. And he's also, again, one of the younger players, so I don't quite think he's fully MVP level yet. So I do really want to see the MVP award go to Luka. As for the other awards, I said that the Coach of the Year award would either go to the Thunder for being the number 1 seed last year and probably the number 1 seed this year. I know Coach of the Year is only a 1-season thing, so I can't use last year as a basis for Coach of the Year this year. However, I do think that subjectively, even like unconsciously, that will play into effect of the voting of people. And especially if the Thunder make the first seed again this year, because last year so many people doubted that they were going to be the number 1 seed. So many people doubted that they were going to go as far as they did against the Mavericks. So if they can sort of quote unquote defy the odds again, that will really go to show the coaching capability and more so also the GM capability of the Thunder. So I know they have an Executive of the Year award now, so that will probably go to the Thunder executive as well, unless some crazy trade deadline thing happens this year. But I put the other candidate as the Timberwolves for both coach and executive, because the Timberwolves have been coached and been built to be a perfect counter to the Denver Nuggets, and that's exactly what they did in the playoffs. And so that goes to show both the executive and the coaching ability, where they can make a really good counter to one of the best teams in the league, arguably at that point. A defensive player of the year, I obviously have Wembanyama. And Wembanyama, in my humble opinion, really should have won it last year, but there was a whole thing about like, oh, well, how is he going to be defensive player of the year if the Spurs are losing? But to me, like, it shouldn't really matter how your team is. It should matter how you are doing. It's defensive player of the year. So Wemby really should have won defensive player of the year. But a huge reason why they didn't is because they didn't want him to win defensive player of the year the same year he won rookie of the year as well. So now that he's going into his sophomore season, I think he's more likely to win the award, especially with the Spurs most likely winning more this season with CP3. So I think Wemby's a lock for defensive player of the year. Rookie, I'm just going to say Reese Shea, because I don't think it's going to go to Alex, because we already saw Alex sort of shifting in the draft, hence why he didn't go as number 1, and Reese Shea did, even though Alex was number 1 in the draft, mock draft for a long time until he finally dropped to number 2 in the draft. So that just shows how people are starting to lose opinions on him, and Reese Shea is going up. 6 man, I have Naz Reid, because that one should speak for itself. Naz Reid has been a meme for all of last season, and I predict that he's going to continue to be a meme for this season, and he's been excellent for the Timberwolves. Now with Karl Anthony Towns gone, it's only going to add more minutes to Naz Reid. People were getting tattoos of Naz Reid's name. Naz Reid's nickname is Naz Reid. Like, I don't know. Naz Reid is just insane, and I love the memes that are coming about him. So I have a feeling he's going to win Sixth Man of the Year. Most improved player. A lot of people have been talking about Wemby winning this one, and that's probably going to be the narrative. So it's probably going to be him. But I would love to see Kuminga or somebody on the Warriors win it because of Klay Thompson being gone. By the way, this is random, but if I keep looking this way, it's because that's where my monitor is, and that's where chat is. So my camera is right here, but I'm looking at myself in the monitor over here just to make sure like the recording doesn't like abruptly stop or anything. So, and then I already talked about my prediction, and hopefully the reality for MVP this season is Luka Doncic. And I'm hoping that SGA, if SGA does not win MVP, I will give him Clutch Player of the Year. Because he has been doing really well in the clutch, saving games. We saw that again in the playoffs against the Luka Mavericks. So they were just a couple fouls away from making it past the Mavericks. So I really think that award can go to SGA. How long have we been recording here? Let me get up and check real quick. 42 minutes? Okay. So let's go through 42 minutes. Okay. So then let's try and go through some team predictions, and then we'll call that an episode. Because since I haven't recorded in a while, I want to give you guys a full hour episode. I was almost going to call the episode there, but that would be too short for you guys, given how long it's been. So I did my West predictions. I haven't posted them on my Instagram yet, but I'm going to after I record this episode, meaning by the time this episode comes out, my ranking should be posted. But I have Oklahoma City Thunder for the first seed in the West. I'm just going to go through my West standings right now. I have Oklahoma City Thunder at number 1 because, again, they were number 1 last year, and I really think that they can do that again, especially now that they added Caruso, which will be really good defensively for them. The main thing they really need to work on is fouling and adding some guard defense because they already have defense and Chet on the big side. So that's a really good pickup for them, and I definitely think they'll be the first seed. And pretty much all the other people that made rankings on the NBA.com website agreed. I have Dallas Mavericks next, although I may change that later because of what I said earlier with Klay Thompson. So Dallas Mavericks number 2. Minnesota Timberwolves number 3. Going back to what I said before, they really have been pushing the pace. Dante DiVincenzo has been an amazing piece for them so far in this preseason, so I really think that they can do really well. Denver Nuggets next. We haven't seen what Westbrook can do. Westbrook could end up being a bust trade for them like he was for the Lakers, but we'll see. But the Denver Nuggets are one of the better teams in the league, everybody admits, so you still have to have them at least top 5. Sacramento Kings I have next because, again, the Kings, if they really put together that system with DeMar DeRozan in place, that's going to work really well for them. I have the Lakers next because Bronny has actually been working really well. And, again, Dalton Knecht I think will really help alongside with Austin Reeves. They have some shooters now from beyond the arc that will really help. I have the Pelicans next. I have them low because really the only player that I've seen they have is Zion. And Zion usually ends up being injured, which is why they lost to OKC. Then I have the Grizzlies because, again, they don't have Steven Adams anymore. Ja Morant has his issues, and Ja Morant is really the only decent player that they have. They did pick up Zach Edey, and they did pick up the 5'8" player, who I think his name is Zuki or Yuki, something like that, Yuki, something like that. But I don't think it's going to be super high, so that's why I have them at the 8th, and they'll be like a play-in team. Phoenix Suns. I mean, again, KD, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker didn't work last year. It's not going to work this year. And then I have Golden State Warriors because all they have now is Curry and Draymond, and I have my own opinions about Draymond and Curry. We've seen him sort of carry the team before, but without Klay now, it's going to be even more difficult. So, but let me pull the NBA.com app, and then I will go into my East ones because I do not have my East ones written down, so I will have to do those on the fly. So, at least I always keep it honest with you guys. I'm not like talking crazy here. Where is it? Hang on. Sorry guys. It's taking a minute here. Okay, Eastern Conference. I probably have very similar to what the rankings were last year. The Celtics will probably take the first seed again. I definitely don't think they'll win a championship again, but they'll probably be the first seed at least. Then I have the Knicks. Actually, yeah, let's put the Knicks at the second seed. Just because I don't think the East is very stacked this year. I don't think the Knicks are going to be as good losing DiVincenzo. So they won 50 games last year. I think that they will be probably in the second to fourth seed range, but they're not going to win 50 games again. I think it'll be like 47 games or something. I'm actually going to let's put the Bucks at third seed again. They really need to get rid of Doc Rivers, though. I'll put the Magic over the Cavs, and then I'll put the Cavs. Pacers. Let's move the Pacers up, actually. So let's do Celtics, Knicks, Pacers, Bucks, Cavs, Magic, 76ers, Heat. Hawks, Nets, Raptors, Wizards, Pistons, Bulls. The Eastern Conference is really going to be a work in progress for my predictions. It's going to be ever changing because the Eastern Conference is not as stacked or as good as the Western Conference. It definitely is not. Which it used to be that the Western Conference was the most stacked conference for a while, and then when teams like the Bucks started winning, it was the the Eastern Conference was stacked with the Bucks and the Celtics and the Heat, and now it's starting to sort of shift back to the Western Conference is king in the NBA. So, but I don't really have any more topics for you guys, so far for this episode. But now that I have a mic arm and now that I'm going to try and watch some more games, hopefully I can actually start uploading the podcast some more. So even though that's all I have for this episode, I'm sure that I will have some more for next episode. And next episode won't take me 3 months or however long it's been to upload. I think the last one I uploaded was the Q&A technically in August or June. So yeah, that was a while ago. And then the last time we talked actual basketball before the Q&A, I was still at my old apartment, and that was like back like almost around when the draft was. So it's been a while. So, but anyways, again, indie game stuff, Patreon, Instagram, all that good stuff in the description, guys. Be sure to like, subscribe, share the video around, all that good stuff. Check out the Nathan But Net podcast on Spotify if you want just the audio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check it out. And we are almost on 10K subs. We are like 20-ish off. We are on like 9,976, something like that last time I checked. So we can really get to 10K here soon, and I do have something planned for that. So with that being said, guys, I'll go ahead and end the episode there, and hopefully I will see you all in the next one. So peace out. Nathan Burnett, episode 68.
This is not okay. This needs to stop now.